I want to introduce our keynote speaker, a dear friend, and it is really a tremendous honor to introduce her. And she happens to be really one of the most inspiring and courageous American Muslim women I know. Linda Sarsour is a racial justice and civil rights activist from Brooklyn, New York. I believe they called her a Brooklyn homegirl or something in one of the recent articles in the New York Times. She's currently executive director of the Arab American Association of New York, and she is the co-founder of the first Muslim online organizing platform, empowerchange.org. You know her from her national media interviews where she always speaks truth to power on issues impacting the Muslim communities and sister communities across the US, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it is police brutality, whether it is Islamophobia. Linda's always on the forefront, defending our faith, challenging Islamophobia, and defending civil rights. She's a leading civil rights advocate for all of us. Please give a warm welcome to our dear, respected sister, Linda Sarsour, all the way from New York. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum, Chicago. I'm from New York City, so we're going to try that one more time. Assalamu alaikum, Chicago. So I came all the way from New York City, and while everyone that's been on the stage has been super inspiring, they're talking about love and things like that, that's just not me today. I'm feeling angry. And I want to really have a heart-to-heart with my family in Chicago about what it is that we're doing here, what's going on in the Muslim community, and what are the gaps and the cracks in our community right now. We live in a country where a man who thinks and has the possibility of being the next president of the United States of America says and advocates for the killing of Muslims with bullets soaked in blood. In this country, we call that freedom of speech. But then we have people who are trying to criminalize pro-Palestinian activism and support of BDS in this country. Welcome to America, sisters and brothers. Let me tell you how you deal with Islamophobes, because I don't think we're dealing with Islamophobes in the right way. Sisters and brothers, I stand here before you unapologetically Muslim. We have nothing to apologize for, sisters and brothers. I am also unapologetically Palestinian, Palestinian to the blood, to the bone, and I'm not ashamed of that. This is our problem, sisters and brothers. You are living in a country where you're not acting like you belong here. Our children are afraid and are scared and are intimidated because you haven't taught them their history in this country. So let's have a history lesson. This country that you live in, the United States of America, has never existed without Islam. Muslims have came on expeditions before there was a United States of America at a time when this land was called the New World. I did research on Islam in America. There were galley slaves, Turks, and Moors from North Africa that came to build the first English colony called Roanoke Colony, which you know now as the coast of North Carolina. And then years later, millions of Africans were uprooted from Africa and brought here on slave ships. And 25 to 30% of those African slaves were Muslim. They were educated. Some of them were princes. They came to this country and had to practice Islam in hiding. See, sisters and brothers, we helped build this nation. There wouldn't be a United States of America without us. So that's the premise that we need to start organizing from as an American Muslim community. Sisters and brothers, we are enough. We have nothing to prove to anyone in this country. And if we don't start acting like we belong here and like this nation was built on our backs and the backs of immigrants and African slaves, then we will continue to be intimidated and scared and worrying about our future. So when you leave here tonight and your children are not with you here, we spend so much time in our Sunday schools and in our Islamic schools teaching our kids to memorize Quran. But what we're not teaching them is about their history as Muslims in America. Let us give our kids a backbone. This, sisters and brothers, is how you start to combat Islamophobia. Sisters and brothers, we got problems in our community. And 99 problems that we have are not the Islamophobes. We are those 99 problems. Sisters and brothers, I'm tired of people trying to tell everybody about what Islam is. I'm not into the pamphlets on the street corners. That for me is not true da'wah. It is time that our community starts not telling people what Islam is. Let's start showing people what Islam is. You have people that go on national television and say things like this: Islam is a religion of peace. I don't think you're adding anything to the conversation by saying Islam is a religion of peace, because all Abrahamic faiths are religions of peace. What I think about Islam that is more important than Islam being a religion of peace is that Islam is a religion of justice. And Islam is a religion of justice, not justice that's just us or justice for just Muslims. Your Prophet ﷺ was not a petty prophet. He didn't just stand for the most vulnerable who were Muslim or for the marginalized that he was Muslim. Our Prophet stood for all marginalized people, for all poor people, for all oppressed people. So if your Prophet was doing that, then why are you not doing that? Sisters and brothers, let me tell you a story about a center in the United States of America, and tell you a story that has inspired me about how we show people what Islam is. There's a brother in New York City that many of you must have watched his video online. A brother named Eric Garner from Staten Island, New York. He was a father and a grandfather. NYPD police officers stopped him in the street. They put him down on the ground, and then Officer Daniel Pantaleo started choking him. And in that video that you can all watch, over 16 million people watched that video all over the world. Eric Garner asked for his breath. He asked to breathe 11 times in that video. And that police officer had no mercy and no rahmah in him to let go of Eric Garner's death till we lost Eric Garner. That police officer, Daniel Pantaleo, still has a job at the New York Police Department. And not only does he still have a job, my taxpayer dollars pay for him to have personal security because Officer Pantaleo is afraid for his life. On April 15th of last year, April 13th, excuse me, I left my family for 9 days. And I started and I co-chaired a march with an African-American sister named Tamika Mallory and a Mexican-American sister named Carmen Perez. And we co-chaired a march from New York City to Washington, D.C. People said, are you crazy? Who the hell marches 250 miles, 5 states? It's impossible. But the young people that wanted to march said they didn't care if it was impossible. They wanted to do something drastic. They didn't think anybody cared about them. That we can see a grandfather and father choked on our streets of New York City, young, unarmed black people, men and women across this country being murdered on the streets of their communities. Enough was enough. So we went on a march, started in Staten Island, New Jersey, took Route 1 all the way down to Washington, D.C. So as co-chairs of the march, we had a responsibility to the 100 people who were marching with us. We had to find places for them to sleep at night. So what I did was, I said, this is an opportunity for me to show them the compassion and the love and the justice that is in my faith and part of my community. So on the 3rd day, we get to Philadelphia. And I found a masjid in Philadelphia called Al-Hidayah Center. It is a mass center, a Muslim American Society center. The masjid is run by predominantly Palestinians. The imam himself was an immigrant. He barely spoke a lick of English. We get to Al-Hidayah Center, and I'm with these 100 people, predominantly young people, black and Latino majority. Only 6 of us were Muslim, 3 of whom were black Muslims. and one Iranian, one Syrian, and one Palestinian, which was me. So we get to Al-Hidayah Center, and we get to the parking lot, and the imam and the board members and their families are waiting for us in the parking lot. And the imam says, Assalamu alaikum. You know, and my people, they've been hanging out with me, so they know exactly what Assalamu alaikum means. And they said, Wa alaikum assalam. And the imam said, we welcome you. This is your house. That's all he said. We walk into the Al-Hidayah Center. They have a beautiful cafeteria. And these beautiful board members and this imam had aprons on. They started serving my people food. They had cooked the food at the masjid. Then, at about 11 o'clock at night, the young people come to me. They say, Sister Linda, where are the people in the mosque? I said, I don't know. I said, they must have went home. You know, maybe they went home to their families. They might have children. They say, what do you mean? You mean this beautiful mosque, these people left 100 strangers in the masjid, in the mosque? That don't make sense. I said, it absolutely does make sense. Because this house that you're in right now doesn't belong to the imam or the board members. This is a house of God. You are creations of God. And tonight, the security of this masjid is in your hands until the folks from this masjid come back. You know how empowered those young people were? They were locking the doors and they went outside to make sure the gate was, I was like, it's gonna be fine. At 5:30 in the morning, the people from the masjid came back and everybody was sleeping. And they come to knock on the sisters section. They were like, Sister Linda, what's that sound? I said, that sound is a call to prayer. Some of them have never heard a call to prayer. Most of them have never been in a masjid. So I got up and I said, you know, this is a call to prayer. You know, now it's the morning time prayer. And then these three boys, friends that were together, that were friends that came together to the march, said, you know what, Sister Linda? Never in my life have I felt so peaceful inside. Never in my life have I felt and heard such a beautiful sound. I don't even know what the guy is saying. It wasn't about, sisters and brothers, the imam sitting them down and telling them, here's the 5 pillars of Islam. It wasn't about anyone lecturing them or us sitting through lectures or khutbahs at the masjid. It was the very essence of how that masjid and that community made them feel as non-Muslims in their mosque. So we leave Al-Hidayah Center. It's this morning time. We went, beautiful breakfast. We leave. We see the imam and the board members pulling out boxes from a truck. And I was like, what are they doing? They were like, this is for you. They bought us a huge box of bananas and tangerines and like 10 cases of water. And they said, this is for you on your journey. Sisters and brothers, those 100 people that slept at Al-Hidayah Center in Philadelphia will be the staunchest supporters and the best defenders of Islam against Islamophobia. This, sisters and brothers, is how you combat Islamophobia in this country. I went to Ferguson. I was sitting in Brooklyn when tear gas was being thrown at protesters who were protesting the murder of an unarmed boy named Mike Brown in Ferguson. And I was watching Palestinians in the summer of 2014 who barely got internet access, who don't know if they're gonna live to see tomorrow, sending messages to black kids in Ferguson, telling them how to protect themselves from tear gas. Think about that for a second, sisters and brothers. People with no resources, barely have an internet signal. They're being bombarded by Israel at that time in August when Mike Brown got shot. And they found the time and the compassion and the empathy to share information with another marginalized group of people all the way on the other side of the world. And here we are, American Muslims, some of whom live in St. Louis, Chicago, right next door in places like Michigan. I took an airplane and I went to Ferguson. In Ferguson, when people asked me why I was there, I said I'm here, number one, because I'm a parent. And because I have a son who's 16 years old. And if I'm gonna sit back and let this happen to Mike Brown, then I'm opening the door for this to happen to my child. But I also came because I'm a Muslim. And my faith calls me to be where justice is needed. I came here to bear witness to the atrocities that are happening in communities like Ferguson, in your country, the United States of America. Last weekend, sisters and brothers, I went to Flint, Michigan. You want to tell me Syria and Palestine? People who live under dictatorships and military occupations? I'm talking about your fellow Americans who live in the United States of America, the so-called greatest nation in the world. I saw people who were bathing their babies in pots with 16.9-ounce bottles of water. They would keep the water for 2 or 3 days and just keep boiling the same water because they don't have enough water to keep replenishing and just bathing their babies in new water. Babies with skin rashes. When they would do lead blood tests on babies in Michigan, if you have lead poisoning, usually the threshold is number 5. There are kids in Flint, Michigan who have level 8, who will have long-lasting effects on their lives, speech impairments, development disabilities. This is not some remote third world country, sisters and brothers. This is right here in Flint. And you know who's up for the challenge in Flint, Michigan? You know who's going to the doors, knocking door by door? Islamic Relief, Muslims from Dearborn, Muslims from Detroit. When I went to volunteer with Islamic Relief last weekend and I was going to the door, these people never saw me before. I wasn't there. It's my first time. But they saw other women in hijab that were like me the weekend before and the weekend before that and the weekend before that. And they kept saying to me, "Peace, sister, peace be upon you. Your people are very beautiful people. We love you. We appreciate you." You think those people, if anybody ever dared say something anti-Muslim in front of them, you think they're going to sit back and let somebody say something? Because the Muslims were there when they needed them most. No questions asked. All we would do, wallahi, is we knock on your door. We don't even say assalamu alaikum. We just say, water. And they would open the door for us. They would find Muslims at their door giving them cases of water. That's all it was. This, sisters and brothers, is what we have not done on a consistent level. People will say to me, "Sister Linda, you know, you're Palestinian, you're Arab, you're light-skinned Muslim. You know, we have a lot of problems in our community. I know you do a lot of work in the Black Lives Matter movement and on these issues of police brutality, but that's not really our issue." And I say to people, when I work on this issue, I don't work on this issue because I'm a light-skinned ally. I'm not a white ally. 1/3 of your community is African American. Those are your sisters and brothers. Not only do they have to deal with being black in America, then they're also Muslim and black in America. So when I'm marching on those streets, when I put my hands behind my back to get arrested in civil disobedience, I do that for my sisters and brothers in Islam, and I do that for other marginalized and oppressed sister communities who need my voice and my presence to stand up for them and their rights. In a neighboring state like Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, there are plenty of Muslims in Cleveland, Ohio, and let me say, plenty of Palestinians and Syrians too. How many times on Eid or on a birthday have you bought your little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 12-year-old son a toy gun to play with? I don't know about you, but I saw my parents do that plenty of times for my little brothers. When we as a country sit back and allow a 12-year-old boy play in a park in his own community with a toy gun, and police officers roll up to the scene before they didn't even get out the car, 1.7 seconds after they showed up to the scene, through the window of a car can shoot a 12-year-old boy down. And the cop that shoots the boy doesn't get any time in prison. We should all be ashamed of ourselves, Muslims included. There's a lot of talk and people say, "Oh, mashallah, we got to follow in the seerah of the Prophet." And we're taught the seerah of the Prophet, and our most leading scholars talk about the seerah of the Prophet. I don't know what seerah they're reading. I don't know what they're teaching you, but I'm going to tell you about the seerah of the Prophet that I know, that I'm reading about. Our Prophet, ﷺ, was a human rights activist. He was a racial justice activist. He cared about the environment and the earth to take care of the earth. Our Prophet was a feminist in his own right. Our Prophet cared about workers' rights. There's a hadith that says, "Pay the worker before the sweat on his forehead dries." Think about that, sisters and brothers. Think about your prophet. If your prophet was, look, when they say, 2 years ago, these young sisters, black sisters, started a campaign that says Black Lives Matter. But in your faith, the faith that you follow, black lives always mattered. We as a community have to show our faith, teach our faith, because these concepts of social justice are embedded in the faith that you follow. The problem is that the Muslims aren't following exactly the way we should, the faith that actually calls on us to be part of social justice movements. Sisters and brothers, I got issues, and I'm just going to be honest with all of you today. I've been to probably 40 cities in this country. People say, where are the moderate Muslims? Where are you? Where are you to condemn terrorism when a terrorist attack happens? Where are you all? I'm tired of that question, sisters and brothers. That question, when people ask us that question, I want you to understand something fundamental here. That question is already rooted in bigotry. It is rooted in the assumption that somehow us as Muslims, we condone violence against innocent people. I'm tired of proving myself, sisters and brothers. You want to hear Muslims condemning violence? Go to Google. Wallahi, I'm not exaggerating. This is a challenge for you later. Muslims condemn violence. Muslims condemn 9/11. Muslims condemn ISIS. Muslims condemn terrorism. Wallahi, you would be on the internet for the next 3 weeks. From how much there is out there of Muslims condemning violence. We're over that, sisters and brothers. I'm tired. I recently went to RIS in Toronto, the Reviving Islamic Spirit Conference, and they gave me main stage. I actually told the brother, I think you got the wrong sister. I'm not an Islamic scholar. I don't know why you're inviting me to this conference. He said, don't worry, sister, we know you're not an Islamic scholar, but we want to link activism with spirituality. I said, all right, maybe that I can do. So I go, me and Sister Dalia Mujahid do a little workshop on the side, and this brother comes up to me. He says, Sister Linda, you're an organizer. I said, yeah, brother, I'm an organizer. He said, only you can do this. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, there's 20,000 people here at RIS. I said, mashallah, I saw them. I said, what do you want to do with them, brother? I'm ready. What's the call to action? So the brother says, well, what if we took these 20,000 people to the streets of Toronto so we can all stand together and condemn terrorism? I was like, Lord have mercy. I said, inshallah, brother, and I just walked away. But then when I was on main stage, that little interaction came to me. Before that, actually, before I left the brother, I asked him a question. I said, brother, how long have you been coming to RIS? He said, oh, mashallah, sister, I've been coming since the first RIS, which is 14 years, by the way. So that means there was an RIS in 2003 and 2004 and 2005, right? And then he was proud of himself. He was like, mashallah, I've been coming 14 years. I said, mashallah, brother. So I walked away. But then when I was given main stage, that story, I just was reminded of the story. So I said to the brothers and sisters that were there, I said, there's a brother in this room. Of course, I didn't identify who the brother was. It's hard to identify a brother in a room of 20,000 people. And I said, this brother wanted me to organize all of you to go out into the streets of Toronto so we can all condemn violence and terrorism together. Now, sisters and brothers, I have no problem with that. If that's what you want to do, you do that. But what I asked the people at RIS, I said, would the same brother ask 20,000 people at RIS to go out into the streets of Toronto, or even us as Muslims, to go out in the 20,000s to condemn the terrorism on our Muslim sisters and brothers with our taxpayer dollars? In the 14 years, there has been an unjust war, is waging war on our Muslim sisters and brothers, and we in this country have sat back and allowed that to happen. When we as Muslims, sisters and brothers, only condemn violence when it's perpetuated by Muslims or perpetrated by Muslims, then you have immediately associated yourselves with those people. When I stand up to condemn violence or terrorism, I do that as a human being, not because I'm Muslim. So if you're going to be in the business of condemning terrorism, do that. But I want you to make sure that you are in the business of condemning all forms of terrorism against all people, including your Muslim sisters and brothers. That is when we show consistency, dignity, and the integrity of our community. Sisters and brothers, a lot of you see me in the media. And I've made some risks in the media. I have a choice to make. Do I go on national television and tell people what they want to hear? Do I go on national television to reframe the conversation so it could make some people feel comfortable? I make a very conscious decision to speak truth to power. And the risk with that is I might never get invited back. That just might happen. Contrary to popular belief, I've been invited back many times. And I'm going to give you an example. Do people remember when the Charlie Hebdo attacks happened? Look, horrible, innocent people. I don't care if it was in Charlie Hebdo, in Paris, Netherlands, in Beirut. I don't care where innocent people are murdered. It's outrageous every time. That should be very clear. But then people wanted me to say, even in our own community, they wanted me to say this: "Just we Charlie, I am Charlie." I am absolutely not Charlie. I am absolutely not going to say "Just we Charlie," because Charlie Hebdo chose to use his publication to vilify my faith, dehumanize my community, demoralize my prophet, and I absolutely will say, you can have freedom of speech, and I have the freedom to call you a bigot and a racist. This, sisters and brothers, shows the integrity and the dignity of our community. No, I am not just we Charlie. And I want to make sure that in the future that you understand what you are projecting when you think and you feel like you are forced into a box where you have to say that. Absolutely not. So I get called by the ammos. Sister Linda, mashallah, sister. But, I said, look, brother, I said, when you go up on national television, mashallah, you say what you got to say. If you want to say that, you say that. I'm not going to say that. Alhamdulillah, little by little, the ammo calls go down a little bit because it doesn't really help much and not really moving in that direction. But my point is, sisters and brothers, is that we have an imperative in this country to speak truth to power. People say, mashallah, America is the greatest nation on earth. I believe that in my heart. But I also recognize and acknowledge that we've made many mistakes in this country. We continue 450 years later. African American are still asking to be fully integrated into this society, although this nation was built on their backs. We live in a country where we have interned Japanese Americans. We've just arrested people that looked like the enemy, and we put them in camps. We have passed legislation to exclude the Chinese, for example, at a time in our history. So this stuff that Donald Trump is saying, people might say, oh, well, he's just a joke. Donald Trump is not a joke. In the state of New Hampshire, 101,000 people in a small state like New Hampshire during the primaries. And you know damn well sure that people don't even know that there's a primary going on most of the time. So if there was 101,000 people that felt compelled enough to go out in a primary to vote for Donald Trump, that's something for me to worry about, and that's something for you to worry about. Sisters and brothers, the time is not yesterday or a week ago or a month ago, and it's not next week or the month or the year after. The time is right now. It's the time for our community to unite. I don't care if you're Palestinian or Syrian or Yemeni. I don't care if you're Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, African American, Muslim, convert. I don't care if you're Sunni or Shia. Let me tell you about the Islamophobes. We got to learn from the Islamophobes. Like, you got to learn from the enemy. The enemy doesn't do their research. When they go vandalize a masjid, they don't go do research about what madhab that masjid is. When they attack a Muslim sister with hijab, they don't tap her shoulder and ask her if she's Sunni or Shia. All they know is that that is a masjid where Muslims pray. All they know is that there is a Muslim sister in hijab that they're going to attack. So if the Islamophobes are treating us as one, then why are we not acting like we're one and fighting back like we're one? Sisters and brothers, right now, today, in 2016, we only have each other. That's all we have. I don't expect anyone else to do anything for our community if we ourselves are not doing it. I got no hope in no one else. I don't have hope in the government, in elected officials. I got hope in nobody. The only hope that I have is in our community. And for us to look deeply inside of our hearts and to say, what are we willing to do for our next generations? Sisters and brothers, building masajid is, mashallah, is amazing. But I want you to ask yourself a question. 20 years from now, do you want a masjid with cobwebs where no one's going to the masjid? Our kids are intimidated and fear and are hiding and not feeling like our masajid are relevant to them. So there's no point of masajid if there are no people that are going to go to them in 20, 25 years. I'm asking you, sisters and brothers, today a question. 30, 40 years from now, I want to know what story you want to tell. I want to know what story people are going to tell about our generation. Is it going to be a story of weakness, of division, of defeat? Is that the story you want people to tell about us 30, 40 years from now? Or do you want to tell a story of unity, of resilience, but most importantly, a story of victory? That's the story, sisters and brothers, that I want people to tell about my generation 30, 40 years from now. What we need right now is very simple. We need the moral courage that your faith already provides you. You don't even have to look outside of our faith for moral courage. It's there. We need the moral courage. We need the unity. And I will tell you right now, sisters and brothers, if we were a united, resilient, steadfast, courageous community, there would be no Islamophobes, there would be no government policies that could bring our community down. I don't care who the next president of the United States is. But what they see, sisters and brothers, about our community, they see the cracks. They're very clear. I don't want you to think this is internal. People on the outside know who likes who, they know which masjid don't talk to which, they know. So they watch those cracks and they fit themselves very neatly in those cracks. So your responsibility is to close those cracks in our community and put our differences aside and to unite once and for all. This is how I know how strong a community is by their CAIR chapter. Sisters and brothers, a lot of people see me and they ask me all the time, they actually think that I work for CAIR. I got no problem with that, but I don't work for CAIR. I am a steadfast, strong supporter of CAIR. I will stand on any national platform you give me to stand behind CAIR through thick and thin. Because let me tell you something, sisters and brothers, I know history. That's why we all need to know history. Only 40, 50 years ago, the NAACP was a blacklisted organization in this country, defending the rights of African Americans. Their leaders were arrested and detained. COINTELPRO infiltrated by the government, by the FBI, by the CIA, you name it. Everything that's happening to our community was happening back in those days. But guess what? 2016, members of the NAACP can call the president and have coffee with him tomorrow if they wanted to. So you want to be the generation that stands by CAIR, because one day CAIR is going to be mainstream in America. And people are going to remember and say, you know what? CAIR was an organization that stood up for the civil rights of all people, and they do, sisters and brothers. One quick story before I leave the stage. Islamophobia doesn't just impact the most vulnerable of our community. We know doctors and lawyers that have been stopped on the northern border, the most prestigious of our community on the no-fly list. People see me and they say, oh, I don't think anybody wants to mess with Sister Linda. But even me, sisters and brothers, in 2014, in September 3rd, I was attacked on the streets of New York City by a man who didn't know who I was. It was the day after James Foley, the journalist, was beheaded by ISIS. And a man was moved to attack me and my colleague on the streets. Guess who were the first people to call me after my mother, but the first people to call me after anybody else but my mother? CAIR National. Sister Linda, we got your back. What do you need from us? We are here to do whatever it is that you need. Sisters and brothers, CAIR is always there when you need them. They have won federal lawsuits. They are bold and courageous, suing the federal government on your behalf every single day. The FBI, no-fly list. They stand up when everybody else is sitting down. So today, if you already donated, support CAIR. We need CAIR. And you don't want to ever be in a situation where you say, oh my God, I'm going to call CAIR because I'm in a situation, but you know what? I didn't give money to them at their last big gala that I was at. Pay it forward, sisters and brothers. Invest, because unfortunately we are at a time where I guarantee you, if it's not you, it's someone close to you is going to come to a situation where they're going to need CAIR, and guess what? CAIR is going to be there for you. Sisters and brothers, I don't want you to ask me why I'm angry and tell me all this stuff about peace and love. That's great. There's always a time and place for that. Don't ask me why I'm angry. I want to know why you're not angry. I want to know why you are not standing with the loudest, most courageous voice to say, this is unacceptable. We belong here. This is our country too. And we will not let Islamophobes become the next president of the United States of America. Salaam alaikum. Thank you, sisters and brothers, for having me here today. And inshallah, I'll see you again soon.